Good morning, and to our friends joining us abroad, good evening. I am your host, Christy Idlekeeper. Welcome to Mirage Talks. Today, we bring to you innovation and problem solving lecture and consultant to touch on the ambiguous subject. What is the problem? We welcome our guest speaker, Zohar Tsalik. Zohar, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Let's get started.
All right. So I'm going to put up my presentation real quick. In the meantime, I'll say feel comfortable to jump in, ask questions. There will be a few times during my presentation where I'll ask questions. Feel free to jump in, unmute, answer, and let's have a good time. All right. So just give me a quick confirmation. Can you hear me well? Does the presentation work? Perfect. All right. So, welcome. Nice to meet you. My name is Zohar Tsalik. This is how you pronounce my name in Hebrew, if that's useful to anybody. I am from Tel Aviv originally, born and raised. I'm a maker as a hobby. That means I know to do very many things very poorly, but I enjoy it, and it allows me to engage with many different technological or non-technological subjects. I'm also a cyborg. Feel free to ask me about that later. And in terms of professional experience, I started studying in the fields of sciences in the Science Center in Tel Aviv, Chemda. I worked part-time in the Weizmann Institute as a experiment apparatus designer. And then I got recruited to the Army. I was defined as a problem-solving expert in the Army, which is a very strange definition for a very young person. But it was interesting. I had a lot of fun doing my job in Army Intelligence, Unit 9900. From there, I moved to the Air Force. I was part of the Air Force Innovation Department, host of the Air Force Innovation Podcast. I was the Chief Research Officer of that department. My job was to scout problems throughout the entire force and implement them into different accelerator solutions that we had inside our department. From there, I went on to found the Unit 81 Innovation Department, and I am now an active consultant for the Ministry of Defense in the fields of methodological innovation. As well as that, I'm also a lecturer, and I run workshops in the fields of creative thinking, problem solving, and so on. Now, I came to you today to talk about innovation. We'll start more broadly, then we'll jump in. We've all heard about innovation as both the buzzword and the actual, day-to-day of our lives. At the same time, I recognize that one particular question in the realms of innovation is often not only a question that it's less easy to answer, but also it's a question that is less often asked, and that is not whether we should do innovation, and the answer to that is usually yes, but rather how do we do innovation. I want you to imagine the scenario in which each of us in our own business, in our own job, we have like this kind of normal day to day, and suddenly we are struck with the sudden and immediate urge and strong urge to innovate. Now, let's innovate, okay? Given this situation, whether it be our boss walking into our door and telling us, "Hey, I saw an amazing TED talk about innovation. Do that," or something more internal where we feel like we want to innovate, oftentimes we don't really know how to go about it. Okay, I want to innovate. I recognize it. Today will be my innovation day. This month is going to be the innovation month. I must innovate, but what do I do next? Now, to really drive this point home, I wanted to talk about thinking outside the box. Oftentimes, when I ask people what innovation means or how do you go about innovation, they usually say things like, "Oh, we'll go into a room and brainstorm and have a good time. We'll run hackathons. We'll try to think about things differently." And all these are good answers, but they don't really give us everything we need. Uh, More curiously, I very often hear, "Oh, how do you do innovation?" Well, you think outside the box, and I wanna spend a moment on that saying. And for that, I want to give an example of a riddle. This is the 9-circle riddle. Our goal is to connect all 9 circles using 5 straight lines without picking up the pencil. So you could imagine for a second how you could, if you want, you could jot it down quickly on your notebook or something, and imagine how simple this kind of question is. This is the simple version of this riddle. I'll show you how it's solved. You run a couple of straight lines through, and all of the circles are connected. So this is the kind of the setup for this riddle. Now the hard part is how we do it. How do we do it with 4 straight lines? Now this is a lot harder. This exact riddle is subject of a lot of interesting research about how people approach solving novel problems. And for most people, this kind of riddle could easily take more than 5 minutes. And many people, about 20% of people, manage to solve it relatively quickly within the first 10 minutes. 80% don't. It's a really hard riddle. And now, while I would like to hear what solutions you might have come up with, I'll jump straight to the point because I want to hear you later. The solution for this riddle is very novel. This is how it looks. I start like the previous version.
anyway, אז הבוקר אמרתי לו, הערתי אותו ב-8 בבוקר,
Somebody's not on mute.
ב-7:30, הוא
That's
אומר
okay.
לי לא.
So I start with the relatively simple, the same solution as before. I start with a line running up top, but then I do something very unique. I continue with my line even further. Now, most people, when I point this out, they have an immediate sense of, whoa, you broke the rules. That's not legal. What is it? First of all, where are you going with this? Secondly, that's what that's allowed. And then what do? I go diagonally down and to the left, straight up and back down to the right. Now, what happened here? What happened here is that we thought outside the box, not only in the creative sense of, oh, look, we were creative and it was a hard riddle and we solved it creatively, but also in the sense that we quite literally imagined a box around these circles. A box that wasn't written here. Nobody told us to imagine this box. Nobody told us that it would be illegal to draw outside of the box. And yet, people struggle to imagine this kind of solution. Now, one of the interesting things about this riddle is that the researchers, the many researchers that studied this kind of riddle and this phenomena of how people react to the realization of this solution, decided to do something relatively mischievous. They decided to split it into 2 groups. One group got the riddle the same way you did today, and the other group was told proactively to think outside the box. Okay? So now, in retrospect, we look at this riddle and we recognize that this is a great hint, right? We're quite literally imagining a box and we need to quite literally think outside of it. Okay? However, this idea of giving us this amazing hint of thinking outside the box didn't help at all. It made virtually no difference in the percentage of people who are able to solve this riddle after 10 minutes. Okay? And that means a lot, right? It means a lot about this statement, because even in the scenario where the statement is more helpful than, our day-to-day, usually our needs for solving problems creatively isn't quite literally imagining a box and us thinking outside of it. Okay, this is a very literal instance of this kind of problem. But more broadly, this idea of think outside the box doesn't help anybody at all in solving problems. It's adjacent to me telling people, be creative, be innovative. It doesn't tell anybody how to go about this. So this kind of highlights a very, very important distinction between 2 types of knowledge that us as humans consume and also give, which is important. One is descriptive knowledge, and the other is procedural knowledge. The difference between these knowledges is that descriptive involves facts and data. Okay, it's knowledge that is very that expresses itself in knowing that you know that the Eiffel Tower is X tall. You know that you need to innovate in order to succeed. You know that I don't know, this fiscal year is better than last. Okay, it is also info that is very easy to write. It's explicit data. I could easily and quite instantly teach other people descriptive knowledge. They could write it down verbatim into their notebook. The other side, the other type of knowledge is procedural knowledge, and it is way tougher. It is the knowledge of processes, how things work, not only in terms of these are the steps, that these are the steps, but to a fundamental level, how things are done. It's to know how and not to know what, not to know that. And it is a lot harder to convey. It's what's known as tacit knowledge. And this expresses in it a very substantial issue that we run into when we're trying to innovate, and that's fixedness. What happens is that we are, in our attempt to innovate, despite our attempt to innovate, we have our own fixednesses. Okay, the ways in which we believe that things must work, the rules that we imagine around our playing fields, and it's fine, it's fair. As a matter of fact, neurologically speaking, fixedness is excellent. Okay, it helps us a lot because our mind strives constantly for being not only effective but also efficient. And being fixed in our thoughts just means that we spend less energy thinking, and that's great. That's a really good thing. I want to give another example of fixedness, so I'm going to use this 3-circle example. And here I'm going to ask for your engagement. So prepare yourself. If you can, grab a note and a pencil, and I'm going to ask somebody, at least one person, to like open their camera and share their result. The task is simple. I want you to draw 3 circles. Doesn't matter. I don't care about the shape, the size, the relation. Just 3 circles. Very, very abstract task. Give it a go. If anybody is having trouble, just let me know. I'm kidding. It should be very, very easy. Whenever somebody is ready, just open your camera, unmute, and show us your example. Come on, somebody is able to draw circles, right? There we go. Okay, nice. Yeah, we got 3 circles. Perfect. Excellent. Can we get one more example? Come on, one more example. We could do this. Okay. Waiting for the Zoom to focus. Okay, cool. Awesome. So we got two great examples, both linear circles, but with some unique aspects to them. One set had the circles slightly overlapping. Another set had the circles shrinking in size. Very interesting. I'd like to point out something. Whenever I ask people to complete this task of writing 3 circles, I find something very, very consistent. Most people draw these sets of circles. These sets of circles are the most popular circles, and you can see they're very similar to the 2 sets of circles we saw here. While they're not exact, okay, I'll give that to you, they're not exact. However, the more consistent rule about how people tend to draw these circles is not that it's these specific 3 sets, but rather that everybody, more or less everybody, I'd say 90% plus of people, whatever circles they draw, they are always symmetrical. There is always a line of symmetry that can be passed through the circle, and that was true in both cases that we saw just now. Okay? Now, this is interesting because I didn't ask for symmetrical circles. I didn't ask for circles in a line, in a straight line. I didn't ask for any. I asked for abstract circles. Drawing these circles was just as legal, but it is extremely rare to see this set. Okay? Now, why is this happening? We have this fixedness within us. The way our brain is wired tends to be wiring in which symmetry is awesome. Okay, we're asked for circles, so we draw symmetric circles. And it's fine. That's totally fine. There's no problem with that. Okay, as a matter of fact, fixedness, the other side, the positive side of fixedness, which can be perceived as like a negative word, the opposite side of that is intuition. Fixedness is this cognitive force that tells us classic solutions for classic problems. I don't need to, every time I get asked for circles, I don't need to spend, minutes or, even, God forbid, seconds thinking about what kind of circles to draw. I was asked to draw circles. I drew circles. Leave me alone, right? That's fine. Okay? So in the end of the day, we're talking about cognitive savings, which is great. Now, there are a few types of fixedness. 2 main types are cognitive fixedness, which includes functional fixedness, relational fixedness, structural symmetrical, which we saw just now, historical fixedness. There are a lot of amazing academic historical examples that go to prove the presence of this fixedness. One of my favorite examples is the Carl Duncker experiment. I'll run you through it. Basically, what Carl Duncker did is he gave two groups of participants the same task. The task is to find a way to hang the candle on the wall stay in a stable manner that doesn't risk burning the house down. Okay, that's the task. What did the people get in order to, the participants get in order to complete this task? Well, they have the wall, of course, and they have the candle. They have a box of thumbtacks. Thumbtacks, right? That's what this is called. Yeah, like, yeah, thumbtacks. And matches. Now, the only difference between the two participants, okay, is they both got the same set of items. The only difference is in how these items were set up. Now, in order to understand the importance of this difference, I'll give you a second to think about what is your solution. Oftentimes, I hear people suggesting to create like a kind of cradle of thumbtacks and try to like put the candle inside it, to try and melt the candle in such a way that you create like a pane where you could use the thumbtack to connect it. Some people discuss just directly trying to kind of use the wax the melted wax in order to glue the candle, not using the thumbtacks at all. And everybody kind of struggles with these solutions. Now, the only thing Carl Dunker did is to the second group, he gave them these exact items, but the thumbtacks were separated from the box. Same box, same thumbtacks, same matches, same candle. The only thing he did was separate the thumbtacks from the box in which they came. And instantly, the participants of that group instantly found a perfect solution. They took the box, connected the box to the wall using a thumbtack, put the candle in the box. Perfect, elegant, safe, stable. Okay? They had the same tools. What's going on here? Okay? This is a perfect highlight for the very specific type of cognitive fixedness, which is functional fixedness. When we are presented with a box full of thumbtacks, that box's function is holding thumbtacks. It's not holding candles. Otherwise, the candle would have been inside it, right? So this minor difference of presenting the participants with a box of thumbtacks compared to with thumbtacks and a box allowed them to break their functional fixedness and give this box new meaning in holding candles. The second type of fixedness is learned fixedness, which is something, the kind of fixedness that many of us will meet in our day-to-day, especially when working with experts and especially in ourselves when we develop our expertise. And there's amazing research about this as well, called the Einstilling effect, which shows that people are able to establish a new fixedness, a new type of cognitive blind spot to amazing, elegant solutions that we're just unable to recognize. They could establish these kinds of fixednesses within the span of 5 minutes. Okay, so I could systematically ask somebody questions in a way that builds their understanding of this kind of problem, so that 5 minutes later I could ask them a very simple question and they'll give me a really, really, tough, not really good solution. Whereas people who didn't have this 5 minute setup time and were first introduced to the simple problem will solve it with a simple solution. Okay? So this is very, very prevalent in our day-to-day. It's with experts everywhere. So we understood fixedness. We understood the context of how do we go about innovation and the fixedness that is involved with it. My first recommendation to you, wherever you work, okay, one of the most effective things that you could do in a very short time when you want to innovate is map fixedness. Look around you in your domain, with your colleagues, with yourself, with your projects, and ask yourself, what are the things that I am doing because they are intuitive to me or intuitive to somebody else? What are the things that I am doing and I don't exactly know to explain why? I do it, because that's how you do things, right? I do it because that's how it was done when I arrived. I do it because you don't need a better way to do it. All of these can be perfect indications to the fact that something here is meeting fixedness, cognitive fixedness. And we can solve this fixedness. And when we do, we are very, very likely to innovate. We are very, very likely to create something new that people will look at and say, whoa, that was cool. Why didn't I think of that? Okay. And the answer is that you didn't think about that because you too, like me, had cognitive fixedness. So cognitive fixedness meets us a lot in our day-to-day. Like I said, when it's good, it's intuition, but when it's bad, it's fixedness. And it is especially prevalent when we're trying to think about new and unique ideas, about novel solutions to problems. Okay, because by definition, the fixedness that we experience is fixedness in problem solving. And when I want to create something that nobody has seen before, okay, then fixedness, my intuition, my learned experience of the same limitations that my mind experiences and everybody else experiences are going to limit me from finding these unique and novel solutions. And fixedness, when I want to create these solutions, I need to solve this fixedness. And creating a context in which I can solve fixedness can only be done by external force. And that should be obvious, right? If I could solve fixedness internally, then I would just, solve it instantly, internally, right? Then it wouldn't be fixedness. But almost by definition, we are left with the fixedness that is harder to solve internally. Okay, so we need an external from an external source in order to solve our fixedness. So if I were to come today and talk to you, I could spend hours talking about fixedness and talking about how do we solve fixedness when thinking about solutions. But actually, this is not what I want to focus on today. It's true and it's important, and I would like to invite you to research this yourself and maybe let's keep in touch. But more importantly for today, I don't want to talk about fixedness in solution. I want to talk about fixedness in problem. Okay. So I'm going to jump into that in just a second. I saw that there were a few questions. I think it might be nice to quickly give those an answer. First question, how does mapping fixedness differ from mapping the underlying assumptions applied to a situation? In my opinion, it isn't, right? These assumptions exhibit within themselves fixedness, and mapping these assumptions and breaking these assumptions, asking yourself whether this assumption is true, is a great way to map fixedness. So yeah, I'm all for that. Do you refer to fixedness or fixation? I think I refer to fixedness. I admit I'm not sure I know the linguistic difference between fixedness and fixation. I believe fixation has more to do with obsession, psychology, about looking at something very specific. Maybe the two are related. I honestly don't know. I'm sorry. Okay, so we're jumping right back in. Problem fixedness. Problem fixedness is super important. Okay, and to highlight how important this is, I want to start with a quote. Now, many of you have probably heard this quote before in some sort of context, maybe a bit differently. If I had only 1 hour to save the world, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and only 5 minutes finding the solution. Now, this quote is often attributed to Albert Einstein. This is not true. It is not an Albert Einstein quote. It has been debunked, but it's still a very interesting quote that many people, when they hear this quote, really feel like this urge to take a deep breath and nod and relate. Like, wow, this is good advice, right? At the same time, most of us spend more than 5 minutes a day solving a problem, right? Most problems that we meet per day probably take more than 5 minutes to solve. Does that mean that behind every problem we solve, every 5-minute problem we solve, there are 55 minutes of problem definition, of research to back that problem definition up? Probably not, and that's fine, right? I'm not saying that every single problem you solve needs to be backed up with problem definition, but I am saying that there's something there. There's something there to unpack. Okay, so let's start with unpacking it. I want us to start with a relatively simple example. Let's imagine a scenario where I am the CEO of a big company and my office building has elevators, because elevators are great and convenient, but I realize that I have a problem in my company, and I define my problem as follows. People are waiting too long for the elevator. Oh, got a typo there, 200. People are waiting too long for the elevator, okay? That sounds like a pretty solid problem definition, right? It's straight to the point. It's the thing that I see in front of me, and that's great. And truly, this problem definition, which I have no problem with it, it's a great problem definition, it leads us to a very particular solution world. Okay, and by solution world, I mean the types of solutions, the style of solutions, the limits of limitations of solutions that I will find for this problem are very specific. Very specific could mean they're solutions that involve people and elevators, and it could mean they're solutions that involve the tech of my particular elevators or my particular people. But it's important to understand that this kind of definition leads me to a particular solution world. However, if I am to take this problem statement and move it ever so slightly, really as small as possible, and say, instead of people are waiting too long for the elevator, I'll say something like people are bored while waiting for the elevator. Okay, I could say something like people are working less due to waiting. Now you could see how all of these are related. It's in the core the same observation, right? The CEO goes downstairs during lunch and he sees lots of people waiting for the elevator. He could say each of these three things, right? These are all valid problem statements. I could also say the elevator is too slow. I could also say people aren't taking the stairs. You know, those, two-floor lazy people who work on the second floor and they could walk. So each of these are very different problem definitions that all focus on the same kind of pain point. And crucially, each of these kind of problem definitions lead to drastically different worlds of solutions. Okay? Drastically different. It's very clear to us that while people aren't taking the stairs and people are bored while waiting are very, adjacent problems, it's very clear that the solution to people aren't taking the stairs is very different to the solution to people are bored while waiting. Each of these lead us to very, very different solution domains. Okay? And by doing this process of really drilling down and understanding what is the correct problem statement, or just creating a few problem statements, I set myself up for ideation and solution creating to be a lot more varied and potentially a lot more beneficial. So how do we go about doing this? Okay, I've convinced you, I hope, that there is work to be done when we approach a new problem in problem definition before we move on to creating solutions. But how do we do this? Let's talk about that pace of knowledge. Okay, how do we do this? So the answer is methods. Okay, well-built academic and business proven methodologies for managing our process of thought, thinking tools, basically. Okay, let's give an example for one of them. Problem definition. Okay, if I ask most of you to define what is a problem definition, I think most of you will probably improvise something. You won't really have something well thought out in advance. And you'll probably say something along the lines of, oh, it's the difference between the delta between what I want and what I have, which is great. It's fine. Okay. But after a lot of research in the subject, we recognize that there are a few guidelines to defining problems that could really set us up for good solutions later in the process. The first one that I must insist on is that problem definitions must be written. I have worked with so many teams who spend so long arguing over what is the problem when it's all in their heads. Once you have it in writing, we could point, we could talk, we could get to the bottom of this, and we could make changes, iterative changes, to finally drill down and understand what is our problem. So it's got to be written. Never, ever work a problem definition. Never work a problem when it's all in your head. Secondly, problems have victims. Okay? What does it mean by problems have victims? Well, if a problem doesn't have a victim, it's just a situation, right? It's an observation, it's a fact, okay? In order for something to be considered a problem, it needs to have some sort of emotional charge. Somebody needs to look at this, whether that be us, a client, a shareholder. Somebody needs to look at it and say, this sucks. I don't like this, okay? I am the victim to this situation. Okay, I often see people who describe problems as kind of an objective reality. Okay, no, problems need to have a victim, and it's often very useful for us to understand who is the victim, and of course to be in contact with them and to try and understand the problem from their eyes. Next, maximum specificity, minimum technicality. Okay, we're not trying to bore people to death with our problem definitions. We are trying to be as specific as possible. The more we can be specific, the more we rule out of our problem domain. Okay, we rule out solutions that might not be relevant. We rule out situations that might not help us in terms of our knowledge. If the more specific we are able to be, the more we could work with the details of our problem. However, we don't want it to turn into technical. Technical is boring. It's an engineer thing, which is fine. I worked as an engineer. But more importantly, it doesn't necessarily touch to the essence of the problem. Okay, if we have solutions that we want to validate, to work on, then we need to get technical, right? We'll talk about this. We have stages that we'll get technical in, but for now, for a problem definition, we don't need to get technical. And lastly, we gotta avoid the lack of solution definition. Okay, what do I mean by the lack of solution definition? Oftentimes, we don't describe a problem, we just describe the lack of a solution that we already imagined for the problem. Okay, we can imagine a scenario in which, I'm hungry. Okay, that's a simple day-to-day problem. I could say the problem is that I am hungry. I could also say the problem is that I don't have Thai food next to me. I love Thai food. Okay, many people might think this is a totally fine problem definition. The problem is with this problem definition that this instantly thrusts you towards the direction of needing to solve it using Thai food. The definition of you lack Thai food doesn't allow you to generate more creative solutions to this problem, to the underlying problem. So we need to focus on defining the situation in terms of what is happening and not what we want to happen but isn't happening. So let's give a few examples. Okay, here are a few examples of problem statements, and they each fail in one of these important factors. First example, sales are going down. Okay, what's the problem with this problem definition? Well, it is extremely objective. Sales are going down could be something awesome if you're a competitor. Okay, it could be something great if you just shifted to a higher, a more premium product, right? You sell less, your price goes up. It could be the consequence of a global pandemic. Everybody's sales are going down. Could be that my sales are going down less than my competitors' sales. That would be good for me, right? There is no present victim in this problem definition. So that's our problem here. Next, our platform isn't good enough for our clients. Okay? Problem here, this is extremely non-specific. Okay? What does not good enough mean? Okay? That could mean so many things. Okay? A team that gives me a problem statement like this, I instantly ask them, okay, ask the client, ask the victim, why is it not good enough? What's not good about it? Such an easy question to ask, and instantly you become way more specific. Okay, is it not good enough because it's too expensive, or is it not good enough because it's too cheap? Is it not good enough because it's second hand, or is it not good enough because it doesn't complete the function that it's supposed to? There's so many reasons for something to not be good enough. This valve B9, which is made of 5-100 steel, is rusting after 24-hour contact with sodium chloride water. Okay, I think this is going to be easy for you. This is very technical. We don't need all these details, especially not, valve B9 doesn't need to be valve B9. It could be a valve. It doesn't need to be 5-100 steel. It could be steel, or it could just not be. Okay, if it's rusting, I'm not sure I care at this point what it's made out of. And 24-hour could be day. Sodium chloride could be salt. There's so much to just make it a lot simpler. And finally, we don't have a drone for remote delivery. This is the classic lack of solution problem. Okay, you want remote delivery, you don't want a drone. There's nothing perfect about a drone. Okay, say we don't have remote delivery. You know what? Don't even say that. Our delivery isn't remote enough. Should it be a little bit more remote? Should it be a lot more remote? Okay, because you're probably delivering to some extent. Like this, asking for a drone in the problem statement, I've gotten tired of this. It's so common, and we don't need this. Okay, it doesn't help us in thinking of creative solutions, pre-established solutions. Yes. So let's run through our next tool. Okay, here's a new problem statement. My dad doesn't like communicating with family via Facebook Messenger. I know, weird choice, Facebook Messenger. Originally I used WhatsApp, but I realized that with international audience, it's a bit less intuitive. So we're going with Facebook Messenger. And I want to show you a very interesting tool that could be used when approaching problems like this. Okay, problem statements like this, something that we could do to our problem statement in order to make it a bit more exact and set us up better. And this is called linguistic or semantic analysis. Basically what we do is we take our problem statement and we highlight it element, okay, linguistic element. So we'll start with my dad, and what we do is we ask ourselves, well, is this the right term to use here? What other terms can we use? Let's look at adjacent terms. Is it my dad or is it my parents? Both of them. Okay. Is it my dad or is it my family? Is it my dad or is it, old people in general? Okay. Is it specifically, Israeli Tel Avivians, or is it more broadly parents who were born in the 50s, 60s, right? It could be many things. So I need to ask myself, is this the right statement? In this case, yes, I know the problem well, and the problem is my dad. It's not a problem with my mom. I don't know about other people, so I'm going to continue on. Okay, next. My dad doesn't like communicating. Okay, what does doesn't like mean? Is this the right thing to include in my problem statement? Well, if I think about it more deeply, if I ask him, what doesn't he like about it? He'll have what to tell me. So I could increase specificity here. I have the opportunity to increase specificity here. In this case, I talked about it with him, and he says that he finds it confusing, just too confusing for him. Okay, so that's already a lot more specific. Next, my dad finds it confusing to communicate with the family. Okay, what do I mean by communicate? Well, I mean communicate. I tried facilitate conversation. I don't know. I tried a lot of terms, and I decided that communicate is the right word. Next, it could be quick with the family. Is it true that the problem is with communicating with my family, or is the problem more broad? Does he manage to communicate with his friends on Facebook Messenger? Well, I asked him, and the answer is no. He has trouble communicating with everybody. So I'll remove it. Doesn't matter. Okay. Next, Facebook Messenger. Is this a Facebook Messenger problem? Come on. There are lots of applications like this. I could, instead of saying Facebook Messenger, I could say instant messenger apps. You know what? I talked about it. He has trouble with email as well. Okay, he has trouble confusing. Finds it confusing to communicate via text. Now look at this difference. We went from my dad doesn't like communicating with the family via Facebook Messenger, very particular set of solutions, to my dad finds it confusing to communicate via text. Now again, many times we'll find that the same solution could have come from both definitions. The right solution could have come from both definitions. Perhaps the solution here is to just teach him how to use the voice recording feature. Way more intuitive for him. Okay, and that could have come from both definitions. However, with the second one, I feel it is a lot more intuitive to take it to there. Okay, because the text is highlighted right in front of it. Okay, the problem is text. So this is how linguistic or semantic analysis can help us in creating different problem definitions. Abstraction laddering. Okay, our next tool in our tool set for varying problem definitions. Let's start with our problem. And let's ask a simple question in order to create a more abstract representation of our problem. Okay, that question could be why. Why does this happen? What is the reason that causes this to happen? Oftentimes, the answer to this will take us back. Will take us more broadly to a more abstract kind of problem. And this is sometimes more useful. Sometimes it's easier to solve an abstract problem because you could, take solutions from different domains and project them. Because you might have something ready. Because you might recognize more potential clients, a bigger market for this more abstract problem. So it's very useful to create this. And we could also do we could also get to the abstract problem in a different way, which is a hypernym. A hypernym is asking what is the category in which this problem resides. So a good example is what we did before. The hypernym of Facebook Messenger would be instant messenger apps. Okay, this also creates a more abstract problem. And we could do the opposite. We could ask how. Okay, this makes us a lot more concrete. We ask, what is the specific instance in which this relatively abstract problem expresses itself? And this gives us something a lot more concrete. And similarly, we could ask, what is the hyponym? Okay, what is the individual example for Facebook Messenger? Okay, so I could talk about a specific chat. I could talk about Facebook Messenger on his phone. That will be a lot more concrete. I could talk about the keyboard that he uses in his phone. And a very interesting kind of added benefit of this tool is that often you don't only need to move up and down when you go abstraction laddering, you could also move left and right. The answer to the question of what is the hyponym of the hypernym of the original problem might not be the original problem. I might have lost you there. So problem A takes us to, we make it more abstract. We get problem B, which is more abstract. And then we try to hyponym it to make it more specific, more concrete. And we don't get A, we get something else. We find that there is another instance of this. And similarly, we could also do it with questions of why or how. And we could do it upwards and downwards. So this is a very useful tool when we're trying to like kind of diverge on many different problem definitions and different scales of abstraction. Next, and I think this is our last tool in generating new and different problem definitions, and that is the undesired phenomena chain, which is a great method developed by the company SIT, Systematic Inventive Thinking, and it starts with a tool that many of you probably know, which is 5 whys. What is the idea of 5 whys? 5 whys tells us, take your problem and ask why 5 times, similar also to abstraction laddering, which we did earlier. You ask why, and you get a different problem, and you ask why, and you get a different problem. You do this 5 times, and what 5 why says is now you have the root cause. Root cause is excellent. It's very, very useful to have the root cause. I am all for root cause, okay? At the same time, this 5 whys approach kind of treats itself as, like, this system kind of treats itself as a black box. Problem input, you put it into a box, the output of the box is the true problem, which is great. It just doesn't generate for us this variance that we might find useful when we're trying to generate many different solution worlds, solution domains. Okay, so the first thing that UDP does is it goes both ways, and it tells you don't only ask why, ask the opposite of why chronologically, which is so what. Okay, if we have A, or let's start with C. Problem is C. Okay, so we ask why does C happen, and we say B, and we ask why does B happen, so we say A. So A leads to B leads to C. How do we find D? We ask so what if C happens? C leads to D. Okay, so we get another problem. So we could also ask so what a few times to kind of expand this chain to both directions. And the second thing that UDP does is it tells us a very interesting story. It tells us that linear causation, okay, if I created a good chain, meaning A leads to B leads to C leads to D and so on, okay, if I created a very good and causal chain, then the solution to any problem in this chain will break the whole chain. Okay, let's look at an example. I start with, I have trouble waking up in the morning. It's true, I have trouble. Sometimes my alarm clock doesn't wake me up. So I have trouble waking up in the morning. Now I ask, why do I have trouble waking up in the morning? Well, the answer is that for me, I go to sleep late. Why do I go to sleep late? Well, I have a hard time falling asleep. Why do I have a hard time falling asleep? Because I'm on screens all the time in the evening. Why am I on screens all the time in the evening? Because I'm trying to catch up to work. Okay, so that is the beginning of our chronological causation chain. Now I go back to my original thing, the original problem where I had trouble waking up in the morning, and ask, so what? Why does this matter? Okay, the answer to so what is, in my case, that waking up just takes a lot more time. Okay, it's not that I'm late for anywhere particular, though that does happen. For me, the problem is that I just have, it takes me a long time to wake up. So what? So I stay drowsy the entire day. So what? So I'm less productive. Okay, and now that we created this chain, I could recognize that solving any of these just diffuses the situation. It doesn't matter if I have trouble waking up if I'm not drowsy. That's what I learned here. Okay, it doesn't matter if I go to sleep late or I'm on screens in the evening if I manage to wake up on time when I want. Okay. And of course, it doesn't matter that I have trouble waking up if, or more precisely, I won't have trouble waking up if I'm able to prevent myself from being on screens in the evening. So these are kind of, as opposed to 5 whys, which takes a problem in and gives a problem out. Here we take a problem in, we extrapolate it to both directions, and we have many different points of attack, angles of attack at this problem that each gives us a very, very different set of solutions. I'm going to skip this, unfortunately, due to time. So let's talk about problem research. Okay, so I recognize that let's imagine everything here was super convincing, and we did all of our due diligence, and we ran a workshop. We even called Zohar in to help with our workshop, and we created many different problem definitions. We chose the best ones. We mapped out what are the solution domains for each of these problem definitions, and we found the areas that we feel have the most potential. How do we go now about making sure that we know what we're talking about? Okay. When I want to approach solving a problem, I need to make sure that I understand it fundamentally. And a problem definition is not enough for this. In order to do this, I recommend using a problem research checklist. It's a very simple set of questions. In my case, 8 questions. In this case, 8 questions, where answering each of these 8 questions gives you the confidence that you know what's going on in this problem. The questions are as follows. First, problem description or definition. This is what we discussed until now. It should be pretty obvious for you now. Next, problem story. Okay, what is the story of the person, of the victim of my problem? Okay, this should be chronological. It should be personal, like we said, victim. It should include cause and effect. Okay, oftentimes when I approach a problem, I have a tendency, especially if it's not a problem I'm personally involved in, like I am a victim of this problem, is oftentimes very finicky to fully understand the emotional nuances of this problem. And I've seen many teams who, using their cold, objective eyes, have offered what they thought was a perfect, elegant, effective, cheap solution, where the client or the user just said, oh, but this doesn't solve the real problem. I still have pain here, okay? This helps us make sure we understand them fundamentally. Next, important background. Another typo, second typo, important background. Both professional background, things that I need to know in the professional context, and organizational or cultural background. Sometimes you just got to understand that in this company, in this client, people don't work this way. There's not a professional reason. It's just a cultural thing, okay? And this is important context for us to understand, which leads me to problem context, okay? Time, location, parameters. Some problems happen only during the day, others only during at night, some only during summer, others in winter. Some happen in the office, some happen at home, some happen during weekends, some happen when I work with particular colleagues, okay? Some happen when I stress this system enough. This is very important context, okay? If I go forth in creating solutions without fully understanding the context of the problem, I might find a situation in which I either overshoot, I solve the problem for context where it didn't even appear, okay? Or I undershoot and I'm missing, potential solutions because I'm not aware of the nuances of when and where this problem expresses itself. Next, who's involved? This is one of the more intuitive questions. Most people know how to, improvise answering who's involved. That being said, oftentimes people skip the affected or affecting sides of things. So for many people, it's intuitive to talk about who's involved. For most, it's not intuitive to talk about both who is affecting the situation and also who is being affected by the situation. Most people go for one or the other. And both are important. If I know who is affecting this problem, who has influence on it, then they are potential solutions. They're also potential teachers about limitations, about previous attempts. Okay, I could recruit them to solving this problem. And on the other side, people who are being affected from this by this problem could teach me a lot about how this problem meets them, about what are their criteria for success. Okay, which perfectly leads me to the next 3. What are the limitations of the problem? Okay, this is extremely critical. If I start solving a problem without understanding what are the limitations, what solutions are out of the question, whether it be budget limitations, external political limitations, regulation, it could be so many things, okay? People could tell me, oh, solve this problem, but don't make it symmetrical. That's a fair limitation, and it changes drastically the kind of solutions that I'm going to think about. It is extremely critical to understand the limitations before I start. Similarly, previous efforts. Many people understand this, and yet so few teams actually do their due diligence here. What has already been attempted and what has been successful? It is possible that the problem as I experience it now, as I understand it now, as my client experiences it now, as the victim experiences it now, it's possible that it is a lot better than it used to be. That so much progress has already been done in this problem, and I need to understand this progress. If I can replicate it, if I can continue it, if I can understand why it's not continuing, I already have a lot of indication of what could be the solution. And that's before I even started creating solutions. I'm still just researching, asking questions about the problem. And finally, success criteria. How do I know when I get there? Okay, I have seen so many teams that work tirelessly to answer all of these 7 questions and still reach the end goal with a solution that the client said, it doesn't help me with this particular set that I didn't tell you about until now. Sorry, I won't buy. Okay? Many times we can't afford to start work without understanding what it looks like when we manage to succeed. So these are the problem research checklist items. I welcome you to use this checklist for your own work. Now, once I have approached the problem and I've created all these varying approaches to it, and I recognize what are the domains that I feel have the most potential, and I've asked all these questions, and I feel like I really have a good understanding about the problem, I want to make sure that the solutions to this problem, or rather that this is the right problem to solve. Okay, it could be that all of my clients are on board, that the victims have really clear pain points, that I already have indication that this is a good problem to solve, and yet it's not good compared to other problems that I could solve. Or somebody who is critical in this value chain doesn't agree with me that this is the right problem to solve. So let's talk about problem validation. What are the questions I need to ask in order to make sure that I'm solving the right problem? And here I take a lot from IDEO's framework. Many of you maybe have heard of it through the design thinking methodology. And that outlines 3 specific questions. The question of viability, which is organizational benefit. Okay. It asks whether there is value to be had organizationally, often measured in money, in profits. Whether there is value to be had for our organization in solving this problem. Okay. This is probably the most obvious thing to validate. Okay, check how much money you save if this problem is solved. What is the market for solving this kind of problem? Ask, some sort of high-ranking CEO if this is a problem that he will put money on. It's so easy to understand whether there is organizational benefit, and oftentimes the answer is that there is not. Okay. So it's especially embarrassing to skip this step. Next, feasibility. Okay, what is the technical possibility of actually creating a solution for this problem? If my problem is that the moon is too far away, then I could shoot it down. Not the moon, the problem. So it's very easy to understand that problems that are infeasible in solving shouldn't even be approached. That being said, it is very hard to value, unlike viability, it's very hard to evaluate how feasible solving a problem is before you start working on solutions. Okay, it's hard, it's not easy, but it's important. You could gather indicators as to what are the chances of what is the feasibility of solving this kind of problem. And finally, desirability. Okay, this doesn't talk about organizational benefit. I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about human experience. The people who are experiencing this problem, do they want it to be solved? Is this an issue for them that prevents them to sleep at night? Are they willing, and how much, to change their behavior in order to solve this problem? Okay, I want to give a quick example of a situation where a project that I worked on that fell due to very astute problem validation. I worked at some point with the Israeli Air Force on a problem involving one of the systems in the F-16 fighter jet. I can't discuss which system, but it's a system that is used. The context is that it's a system that's used only in emergencies, and that it is extremely uncomfortable to use. It requires some unhealthy hand movements to activate the system. So they naturally hate it. This problem came up in a problem scouting run that I did in the Air Force, where I met with pilots, and they told us, this specific practice run of using this system, I hate it so much. My hand is sore for days following this practice. Okay, I listened to this and I was like, whoa, we have a serious problem here. Clear victim, okay, who is also engaged. That feeling how these very well-regarded pilots are complaining about such a thing. I felt like there was something here. Next, I went to talk with the development agency that creates modifications for the F-16. And I asked them about the system, and they said, yeah, well, it's a legacy system. It's very old. It's been a while since we developed it. It's really hard to create changes. But, maybe. I don't know, maybe there's a way to solve it. Okay, I marked a half check on feasibility. I'll need to look into that. Next, I went to talk with the commander of that Air Force base. And I told him, listen, I found this problem. I believe it might be feasible to solve it. What do you think? And he said, wow, what boring complaints. These pilots are in the air practicing a life or death situation, and they are, complaining about being a little uncomfortable in their head. Come on, this has no organizational benefit. Okay, on the contrary, I am happy that the pain of this experience helps them register the direness of the situation in which you use this system. Okay, there is no organizational benefit for you to solve this. This is a very, very extreme case where feasibility was almost good, desirability was great, viability zero. Okay, so once I find the sweet spot where I believe there is good indication to viability, feasibility, and desirability, I could move on to who is hopefully going to be your next lecture or whatever you're already used to in solving the problem, taking my current problem definition, taking these solution domains, and running forward with them. It's important for me to mention for problem validation that since we are working on validation before a solution, we're used to validating solutions, not problems. It's very important that we do it anyways, we don't skip it, but that we listen to indicators. We will never be able to fully say whether the viability is there, the feasibility is there, the desirability is there. We won't be able to say it until we have a solution in hand, okay, or a concept of a solution in hand. And yet, there are many ways to evaluate what are our chances on each of these beforehand. So, I think that's it. That's been me. We've discussed, just a quick recap, we've discussed the importance of understanding how we could go about innovating, and more specifically, the role of creating different problem definitions that lead to different solution domains as a role, its role in the process of creating innovative and novel solutions. We've discussed how to go about problem research, and finally how to validate this problem. I, of course, am available both for questions and for help in any of these subjects. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, keep in touch. I'm available for more lectures and of course workshops. And it was really fun to be here, and I'm open to questions. So show me what you got.
Zohar, thank you so much. What an amazing topic, and I learned so much today. I highly appreciate you. And like you said, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask Zohar directly, or of course, you're always welcome to send to the chat box.
So I don't have a question, but it was a fascinating, great presentation, and I want to thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Anyone before we close? Well, I guess you covered so many topics. They're speechless.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm available for questions also later, so I'm not giving up that easy. But yeah, I hope it was helpful, and the info wasn't too much, but practical enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, last call before we close. All right. Well, Zohar, on behalf of Paul Mirage and the Mirage Institute, thank you so much for enlightening our Mirage tribe highly appreciate you and appreciate everyone for joining us today. Until next time,
Of course. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
take care.
Thank you.